Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive that really goes straight to the foundation of human conflict and suffering.
Right. We're moving far beyond just tracking fake news or, managing information overload.
We're discussing what happens when information, abstract concepts, and our own personal identity fuse together when they form this rigid, often painful structure in the mind.
And this structure is what our sources analyze so profoundly as a view, or Diṭṭhi. And if that sounds a bit academic, trust me, this is the ultimate blueprint for mental rigidity, for internal suffering, and even for external conflict.
It really is.
Our mission today isn't to look at what you believe, your politics, your religion, your personal philosophies, but to get into the precise, almost mechanical structure of the attachment to that belief.
Exactly. Our sources are incredibly dense on this. They map out the anatomy of conviction with the precision of a surgeon. And our mission here is to give you a detailed, practical guide to understanding the root cause of so much mental suffering.
Because it's not the information itself that's the problem.
Not at all. It's not the sheer volume of information that causes us distress. It is the fierce, often totally unconscious, clinging to certain fixed interpretations of that information. That's what creates the trap.
So we're showing you, step by step, exactly how these rigid views, these Diṭṭhi, are formed in an uninstructed, ordinary person.
Yeah.
Starting right from the first moment they experience the world.
And to really emphasize the scale of this default human error, let's just start with a few staggering statistics from the sources.
Okay, let's hear them.
A view, a Diṭṭhi, is defined very simply as the clinging and attachment to ideas and fixed interpretations. But when we look at the quantitative scale of this attachment, well, the mind operates within a dizzying matrix of confusion.
So for any view to even take root, there have to be what the sources call 8 bases of views to any. These are the foundational conditions that allow the fixation to grow.
And once those conditions are met, the mind is then bound by 18 causes of obsession with views, the apariyufanani. These detail exactly how these fixed beliefs restrict and bind the mind in distress.
And this is the one that always gets me. If we look at the total scope of human delusion, particularly when it comes to identity, the sources talk about a total of 300 attachments to views, Diavina
300. And these aren't just minor opinions. They are fixed foundational errors based on self-identification that just permeate every single level of our experience.
This proves that this problem isn't some rare philosophical issue. It's the default pervasive operating mode of the untrained mind.
It's the factory setting.
Right.
There.
So let's start at the very beginning, the soil and the seeds. Before you can cling to an idea, the conditions for that clinging have to be there.
Mm-hmm.
These 8 bases are crucial because they describe the common human experience. They show why it's almost inevitable that an ordinary person will develop these deeply entrenched wrong views. So what has to align for this whole process of attachment to even begin?
What's fascinating here is that the first 5 bases are they're just normal sensory and mental operations, things that happen every second.
Okay.
It's the last 3, which involve cognitive errors and, social influence, that truly turn the process corrosive.
So let's walk through the first one, the most foundational element, the raw material we're all working with.
That is the aggregates, or the building blocks. In the sources, they're called the khanda. The 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
The basic components of being alive, essentially.
Pretty much. And they are the basis for views because they serve as the raw material for clinging itself.
Right.
They are the ever-changing momentary components of what we mistakenly call me or mine.
So you can't have clinging unless you have something to cling to.
Exactly. Even if it's ephemeral, you need something to try and stabilize. You're trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. The aggregates are the Jell-O.
That's a great image. So the aggregates are the material out of which we construct our mistaken identity. But that raw material only becomes a problem when the second factor is present.
Precisely. The second base is ignorance, avijja. This is the fundamental lack of knowledge. It's the condition that gives rise to views because it's the cause and condition for all the delusion that follows.
And what are we ignorant of specifically?
We're ignorant of the true nature of the aggregates, that they're impermanent. We're ignorant of the true nature of suffering, and we don't know the path out. Without ignorance, the aggregates would just be temporary phenomena passing by, like clouds in the sky.
But with ignorance.
With ignorance, they become fertile ground for fixation. They become my form, my feelings, my thoughts.
And that immediately leads us into how we meet the world, which I think is the third base. Contact. Faso. This is the point where our internal senses meet an external object, right?
Yes, contact becomes a base of views by being the cause and condition for the very next base, which is perception. When light hits your eye, or a sound hits your ear, or even just a thought registers in your mind, that sensory or mental contact immediately sets the whole process in motion.
It's the spark,
It's the spark that lights the fuse.
which flows seamlessly into the fourth base, perception, sanya. This is where that raw input gets its first layer of meaning. How does perception lead to a fixed view?
Perception is a crucial step because it's the labeling and interpreting function. You see a new car, your perception doesn't just register metal box with wheels, it instantly labels it desirable, fast, expensive, or maybe ugly or impractical.
And that label is based on all my past experiences and conditioning.
Exactly. That label, driven by your past conditioning and fueled by that fundamental ignorance we mentioned, lays the groundwork for views to form. We attach to the interpretation of the experience, not the raw input. And if the perception is fixed, that car is the key to happiness, the view begins to solidify.
Okay, so from perceiving and labeling, we move to actively thinking about it. That sounds like the fifth base. Thought or mental application, vitakka.
Yes, thought serves as a base of views by initiating what's called mental proliferation. This is the mental chatter, the internal narrative that takes that simple perception, desirable car, and spins it into a complex story.
A story about status, happiness, what my life should be like once I own it, how everyone will see me differently.
All of it. It multiplies the initial mistake exponentially. It takes one small piece of data and builds an entire worldview around it.
Now we get to the internal mechanism that, to me, seems like the real engine of the problem. The one that guarantees we look for the wrong answers, even when faced with evidence. The sixth base is unwise attention ayaniso manasikora. This sounds like a core cognitive failure.
It is. I'd say it's the single most critical internal mechanism. Unwise attention means fostering erroneous thinking. It means actively paying attention to the aggregates in a way that looks for permanence, looks for a self, or looks for lasting satisfaction.
Even though those qualities are fundamentally absent.
Exactly. Instead of asking the wise question, is this changing? Is this worth clinging to? Is this really me? The uninstructed person asks, how can I make this last forever? Or how does this reflect on my permanent self?
I see. So if I'm having a painful argument with someone, wise attention would look at the causes and conditions of the pain and the impermanence of my anger.
Right.
Unwise attention, on the other hand, focuses solely on how the argument validates my fixed self-view, how I am right and they are wrong, ensuring the pain continues and deepens.
Precisely. This misdirection guarantees the development and reinforcement of wrong views. If you are always looking for yourself in phenomena where a permanent self does not exist, you will always find a fabricated, fixed view to cling to.
This internal failure, this combination of ignorance and unwise attention, it doesn't just stay inside our heads, it pushes us outward into our social spheres.
Yes, and the last two bases are entirely about external influence, which are incredibly relevant today.
Let's start with the seventh, bad friends. Papamita.
And this doesn't just mean associating with criminals, necessarily. In this context, it means associating with those who promote and reinforce wrong views.
People who tell you what you want to hear, even if it's wrong.
Exactly. Views that deny moral consequence, encourage deep self-fixation, or celebrate extremes. Their continuous influence validates the erroneous thinking that's already been fostered by your own unwise attention. It turns a solitary error into a shared reinforced dogma.
It's the echo chamber.
It's the ultimate echo chamber.
And finally, the eighth base, which is just the noise of our age, external speech or influence, paratogoso. This is literally hearing misleading words from others.
Absolutely. This encompasses general media, algorithms, social media, or any pervasive external influence that shapes incorrect views about reality, morality, or identity.
So if the uninstructed person is already predisposed toward error because of the internal basis,
Then external noise provides ready-made, packaged wrong views to instantly latch onto. It's cognitive convenience food. It saves you the trouble of building your own delusion from scratch.
wow, that provides a really profound summary. Views are not random opinions. They are the inevitable result when the basic components of human experience, your body, your feelings, your thoughts, and the people around you, all operate under the fundamental cloud of ignorance, guided by unwise attention.
It makes perfect sense that an ordinary person defaults to the wrong view.
It shows the complexity of the trap. You have to fix 8 different points of failure just to stop the initial mechanism from firing.
And that leads us directly to the primary view that grows out of this very fertile soil.
So if the 8 bases are the soil, the primary, most pervasive, and most stubborn view that grows from them is the belief in a permanent, fixed self. The sources call this the view of identity, Diṭṭhi or Diṭṭhi.
And that's the root of the tree of suffering.
This view isn't just a philosophical error, is it?
No, not at all. It is the core automatic attachment that drives all personal suffering and conflict. It's defined by this core formula of clinging and attachment that the mind relentlessly, automatically applies to absolutely everything it encounters.
And that formula, that mantra of delusion, is critical for the listener to internalize.
It's the triple attachment. 3 simple phrases. This is mine. I am this. This is myself.
This is mine. I am this. This is myself.
This thought pattern is applied without any discrimination to all phenomena. Not just intellectual concepts, but sensory input, your body parts, your intentions, your feelings. Everything that passes through consciousness gets stamped with this formula.
Let's illustrate this mechanism by focusing on how the uninstructed person applies this self-clinging to the 5 aggregates we mentioned earlier: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
Right, because when we talk about the view of identity, we're actually talking about 20 distinct forms of self-view.
20. How do we get to that number?
It's because the person misidentifies each of the 5 impermanent aggregates with a permanent self in 4 distinct logical modes. Let's use the most tangible aggregate, form, rupa, which includes the physical body and all matter, as our foundational example.
Okay, so let's take the body. What's the first mode of misidentification?
The first mode is the simplest, most direct one. It's seeing the aggregate as self. The thought is, form is me, or I am this physical body.
My identity is my body.
Precisely. The sources use the analogy of a lamp flame and its color. They are inseparable. In modern terms, this is clinging to identity based purely on physical appearance, health, or athletic ability. Myself is my physical fitness. If my body declines, I decline.
Okay, that's clear. What's the second mode?
The second mode introduces a sense of ownership or possession. This is seeing the self as possessing the aggregate. The thought is, myself has this form.
So the self is seen as the owner, separate from the body, but in control of it.
Exactly. The analogy from the text is a tree possessing its shade. The tree is the owner, and the shade belongs to it. In modern life, this is the entrepreneur who says, myself possesses this immense company and wealth. The self and the wealth, or the form, are distinct, but the self is defined by its ownership of them.
I see. And the third mode flips that spatial relationship, making the self the container.
Yes. This is seeing the aggregate within the self. The self becomes this vast, stable vessel, and the aggregate resides inside it. The analogy is the fragrance within a flower.
So a person believes, myself contains this intense feeling of happiness, or myself contains my genius.
Exactly. They feel the self is the unchanging core that holds all these temporary phenomena.
And the fourth mode is the reverse of that. The aggregate becomes the container for the self.
Precisely. The fourth mode is seeing the self within the aggregate. The form or the body is now the casket holding the jewel of the self. The classic analogy is the jewel in a casket. The person wrongly believes that the self resides within the physical body or the mind.
Like the belief that a soul is housed inside the brain.
A perfect modern example. The physical body is seen as the necessary temporary environment for the permanent self.
So we take those 4 modes of misidentification as possessing, within, and contain, and we apply them to form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness.
That's 4 times 5, giving us the 20 forms of the identity view.
And this fundamental error is what drives that astronomical number of 300 attachments.
The clinging is comprehensive. This 4-fold pattern is applied to absolutely everything that can be experienced. The sources provide examples that demonstrate the sheer thoroughness of this delusion, which is crucial for understanding the mind's tenacity.
Give us a few vivid, maybe even shocking examples of this pervasive clinging.
Okay, think about the sensory bases. The mind clings to the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself, applying the formula. This eye base is mine. I am this. This is myself. The identity gets tied to the very functioning of the sense organs.
That makes sense. We worry intensely about losing our sight or hearing because we feel the self is diminished.
Of course. But the clinging extends to phenomena we are typically indifferent to or even repulsed by. Even our innermost mental processes are claimed. We think, this intention towards success, Rupa Sanjatana, is mine, or this craving for wealth, Rupatana, is mine.
We identify with our desires and our ambitions as if they are permanent aspects of who we are.
Yes. And for the ultimate example of the absurd lengths this clinging goes to,
Okay.
it extends to the granular composition of the physical body. The mind clings to. This hair on the head is mine. This blood is mine. This bile, pitta, is myself. And most tellingly, this feces, karisa, is myself.
Wait, clinging to one's own waste product as myself? That really drives home how utterly deluded the mind is when applying this ownership formula.
It's the ultimate illustration of the error's automaticity. It's not logical, it's a reflex.
So the mind seeks self-identity and permanence everywhere, even in the most impermanent, unpleasant, and rejected things.
Everywhere. And all this complexity rests on one critical logical fallacy that the wise person recognizes. View is not the object, and the object is not the view.
Let's break that logical distinction down because it feels like the heart of the matter. If the view and the object are distinct, why is it so impossible for the uninstructed person to see that separation? What mechanism forces them together?
The mechanism is that combined failure of ignorance and unwise attention. The physical reality, the vathu, the object, say your hand, is impermanent and constantly changing at a cellular level.
Right.
The view, the Diṭṭhi, the fixed mental construct that says, this is my hand, it is eternal, it defines me, is distinct. The fusion happens because the mind, driven by ignorance, needs stability and identity. It wrongly combines the mental construct of permanence, which is the view, with the physical reality, the object. It projects the fixed idea onto the fluid reality.
So when I look at a beautiful sunset, the object is just the light hitting the atmosphere.
Correct.
The view is the idea that I must capture this moment forever because it reflects the permanent beauty I possess. I'm not really clinging to the sunset. I'm clinging to the idea of ownership over the feeling the sunset generates.
Precisely. You are clinging to the idea of ownership, which is why when the sunset fades, you suffer, not because the sunset is gone, but because your fixed idea was contradicted by reality.
And the wise person?
The wise person simply recognizes the hand is just form, the feeling is just feeling, and there is no I to own or possess them. They see the gap between the object and the view.
Okay, so having established this personal mechanism of self-clinging, let's zoom out. Let's look at the formalized errors in doctrine and morality known as wrong view or vicharihi.
This is the shift from a personal psychological error to a catastrophic error about existence, causality, and moral responsibility itself.
Vicharihi represents these fundamental denials that poison every subsequent action. Our sword is to detail 10 specific wrong views, and their collective impact is to basically negate moral efficacy and the reality of consequence.
It's a total breakdown of the moral universe.
Let's go through them. Because if you believe these 10, you have effectively denied moral existence and social responsibility. That seems to be the true catastrophic insight here.
They systematically dismantle causality. The first few deny the value of any altruistic action. So you have, there is no giving, there is no sacrifice, and there is no offering.
Basically, any act of generosity is pointless.
Then we get to the absolute core denial of causality. There is no result or effect from good or bad actions.
That's the most dangerous one. That's negating karma. If there is no consequence, any action is permissible.
It's the green light for total nihilism, and the denial of existential reality follows right after. This world does not exist, and the next world does not exist.
Which is followed by the denial of moral authority, spiritual origin, and ethical relationships.
Yes, there is no mother, which denies the moral weight of that parental relationship. There is no father. Then there are no spontaneously born beings. And finally, there are no enlightened teachers who have rightly realized and taught both this world and the next.
Wow. If a modern political ideology or a corporate culture operated on those 10 principles, no consequence for action, no reality in either this world or the next, and no moral authority, you have complete ethical nihilism.
You do. This is why Mishadi is so destructive. The corrupted view guarantees negative results. It acts as the corrupt seed, as we'll discuss later.
But first, we need to discuss a related view. The view of pleasure, saradehi. This requires some fine nuance. Pleasure itself is natural. So why is the view of pleasure classified as a wrong view?
This is a vital distinction. Pleasure, the asada, the enjoyment that arises from sensory contact, say, the sweetness of a mango, is distinct from the view, the dehi. The problem is clinging to that enjoyment as a permanent, satisfying truth.
It's the fixation.
It's the fixation. When the mind latches onto pleasure and clings to it, believing this pleasure is the ultimate truth and it must define myself, that attachment becomes a corrupt view. And it leads to profound misunderstanding.
So enjoying a moment of success is just pleasure. That's fine.
Of course.
But the fixed, rigid belief that the existence of pleasure is the meaning of life and the constant insistence that it must continue, defining your entire self-worth, that transforms into a Diṭṭhi.
And this manifests in 35 forms of attachment. When this attachment to pleasure combines with craving, it's called Diṭṭhi. A person dominated by this view is one who has fallen into wrong view, and their choices will lead to suffering, even if they're actively seeking enjoyment.
Let's look at the result of holding these fixed, corrupt beliefs. Our sources detail 18 obsessions or mental entanglements. These terms vividly describe the experience of having a rigid, destructive belief system, the mental suffering it causes.
These aren't just names, they are emotional states. Holding a wrong view feels like something. It becomes a fetter, literally chaining the mind, preventing any movement toward freedom.
It also becomes a thorn.
A thorn, causing constant physical and mental distress. It's like a piece of shrapnel sticking in your mind, demanding that you defend it, that you argue for it. It's a source of constant pain.
And a knot.
A knot, Diṭṭhi, which is so difficult to unravel or untie. It creates mental deadlock. It also becomes a wilderness or confusion, Diṭṭhi, where the mind just gets lost in intellectual complexity and can't find a way out to simplicity.
And finally, agitation.
Agitation or restlessness, the view constantly causes internal unrest, argumentativeness, and intellectual strife.
That list perfectly describes the mind of anyone stuck in an online echo chamber or a polarized political debate. The view stops being an idea you hold. It starts being a source of pain, a knot you can't untie, a thorn that causes distress.
It is fixation, limitation, bondage, and a constant source of mental distress. This is the subjective experience of attachment.
Before we move on to the philosophical extremes, we should clarify the hierarchy here. The sources make a clear distinction between attachments that are intellectual errors views and those that are purely emotional or motivational, which are fetters but not views.
This is a crucial distinction for the learner. Some factors bind us to suffering, we call them fetters, and they are also intellectual views. The big one is identity view, Diṭṭhi.
But other binding factors are purely emotional or motivational and are not defined as views.
Exactly.
Can you give us some examples of those non-view fetters?
Sure. Sensual desire, kamaraga, is an incredibly powerful fetter. It binds us to seeking pleasure. But it is an emotional craving, not a view. Ill will, piha, conceit, mana, and even ignorance, avijja, are also powerful fetters.
So they are emotional and motivational chains, distinct from the intellectual or identity-based attachments that define a Diṭṭhi.
Right. Views are fixed intellectual assertions, whereas things like craving and ill will are more like forces of energy pushing and pulling the mind.
Okay, that makes sense. So if the 20 forms of self-view are the personal error, now we're moving into the grand philosophical traps, the extreme views antagakikati.
Yes. These prevent clear sight by clinging to absolute polar opposites. These 50 forms of attachment are where people get stuck in debates that lead absolutely nowhere.
And the most famous extreme pair are eternalism and annihilationism. These aren't just ancient concepts. They really describe modern ideological conflicts about the nature of consciousness and mortality.
Absolutely. Eternalism, Sasateri, is the view that the self, or a soul, or the world is permanent, unchanging, and continues forever.
And this arises in 15 forms. Why that number?
It's specifically when the self is misidentified as possessing the aggregates, that second mode we talked about. You take the 5 aggregates, multiply them by the 3 time dimensions of past, present, and future. It's the tree possessing the shade, but extended into an eternal future.
And its opposite, annihilationism, which is perhaps more common in modern secular thought.
This is the belief that the self is absolutely identical to the aggregates. And therefore, when those aggregates cease entirely upon death, when the body and mind break up, the self is totally destroyed. Nothing continues.
And this arises in 5 forms.
Yes, from the belief that the self is the aggregates, like the lamp flame being identical to its color. Once the flame goes out, everything is extinguished. This denies continuity, future consequences, and any moral weight to actions after death.
I want to pause on the idea that these extremes also extend to views about the world itself. Why does the mind get so hooked on the world being, say, eternal or finite?
These are also categorized as extreme views. The world being eternal or not eternal, that's 5 ways each. And finite or infinite, also 5 ways each. These are fixed conclusions that often stem from misinterpreting our own internal reality.
How does someone fall into the view that the world is infinite just from their own mental experience?
The sources explain this beautifully, and they link it directly to meditative practice. A meditator might achieve a state of deep concentration where they perceive a limited space, a paritayokasa that's filled with a universal color or light. If they cling to that temporary, internal, limited experience, they can jump to the conclusion. This limited space is the world, and therefore the world must be finite. That attachment becomes a wrong view.
And the opposite.
Conversely, if they enter a deeper state and experience a vast, boundless expanse of consciousness or light, they rush to the conclusion, the world is infinite and boundless.
So in both cases, they are mistaking their temporary mental construct, the view for the objective, physical reality, the object. It's the same error as the 20 self-views, just applied on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. They're confusing the map, which is their internal experience, with the territory of ultimate reality.
And then we have the specific structural extremes concerning the self and the body. The mind clings to either total unity or total separation.
Yes, the self and the body are the same. They're inseparable and identical. That's 5 forms of clinging. The opposite is the self and the body are different. The soul is completely separate from the physical form, another 5 forms.
Both are rigid, extreme views.
They cling to either absolute unity or complete separation, and that blinds the person to the truth of their interdependent and momentary nature. The wise see that neither statement is entirely true nor entirely false because the self is a process, not a substance.
This all culminates in the grand duality that seems to trap every serious thinker and seeker. The view of existence versus the view of non-existence.
This is the duality of bhava, which means existence or becoming, and vibhava, which means non-existence. The sources state that most sentient beings are trapped between 2 tendencies. Some lean towards clinging, which is ulyana, and others rush away, atitavana.
Let's define pavadihi, the view of existence or clinging. How does this manifest in an ordinary person?
Bhavadihi is the tendency toward what's called ulyana viniveso, the fixation on continued being. Those who hold this view delight in existing, they revel in it. They find joy in the idea of permanence and continued becoming.
They actively reject the idea of cessation or annihilation.
Absolutely. This is the person whose identity is tied entirely to their future ambitions, their family line, or the legacy they will leave behind. The eternalist view is a bhava view. They cling to the idea that the self must continue to exist and progress.
And vipavadihi is the opposite, the urge to reject, escape, or nihilistically rush away from it all.
Vipavaditi is the view of non-existence or rushing, atitavana viniveso. These people are profoundly distressed by existence. They're repelled by suffering and disgusted with the endless cycle of repetition.
And so they take refuge in the view of non-existence.
They do. They believe annihilation is the only peace. The annihilationist view and the denial of moral causality are classic Vipava views. This is the modern nihilist who concludes that since life is meaningless, action is irrelevant, and cessation is the only worthwhile goal.
So the core trap is that you can be clinging fiercely to life and future existence, or you can be clinging just as fiercely to the idea of complete non-existence and cessation. The problem isn't the existence or non-existence.
But the clinging to a fixed idea about it? Precisely. The wise ones see clearly by seeing things as they truly are. They surpass attachment to both extremes. They neither delight in existence, nor are they distressed by it.
They proceed instead toward disenchantment, dispassion, and cessation.
Without clinging to the idea of cessation. The entire entanglement is caused by conflating the ephemeral object, the vatu, with the fixed, permanent idea, the Diṭṭhi, that we project onto it.
Okay, we've established the mechanical, personal, and philosophical scope of the problem. We've seen the 8 bases, the 20 self-views, the 50 extremes. So what? What does this all mean? Why is holding a wrong view michedihi so profoundly dangerous in practical, everyday terms?
The danger is not abstract, it's systemic. The sources are absolutely explicit about this. Any physical action, any speech, or any thought performed in accordance with a wrong view,
Along with the person's aspirations and intentions.
will inevitably result in outcomes that are undesirable, painful, and harmful. The outcome is fixed by the view.
I need you to elaborate on that. Doesn't doing a good deed, say, donating to charity, still lead to a positive result, even if the person holds a wrong view?
This is where the analogy of the bitter seed is absolutely vital. The wrong view is the bitter seed, the papika bajau. The bodily action, like donating money, is like the nourishing soil and water.
Okay.
Just as seeds from the neem tree or a bitter melon or colocynth will grow into bitter, unpleasant fruit, regardless of how much nourishing soil and water you give them, the corrupted view guarantees the negative outcome.
So the action itself is secondary to the intention and the underlying view.
Exactly. The view determines the direction and the nature of the result. If a person donates to charity but does so driven by the wrong view that there is no result from good actions, or if they do it to reinforce the fixed identity that I possess this wealth and myself is charitable, they are creating a subtle but profound suffering for themselves.
Because the underlying self-view or the denial of causality ensures the outcome will be undesirable or painful, even if they superficially gain praise.
Right. It sounds like the wrong view acts as a metaphysical poison. It guarantees the accumulation of negative outcomes, undesirable, unpleasant, harmful, and full of suffering.
And the ultimate existential consequence.
For a person totally submerged in Diṭṭhi, it's catastrophic. Their destination is specified as only two possibilities: hell or Naraya or the animal realm. It underscores that denying causality and moral responsibility is the most fundamentally destructive stance a mind can take.
This brings us to the moment of truth for the learner. How does one break this mechanism? How do you destroy the basis of views and dismantle those 300 attachments?
The destruction is a sudden, irreversible act of insight. The solution is explicitly named as the path of stream entry, the Sotapadimagga. This is defined as the destruction of the basis of views, Dhyana Samugata.
Stream entry is the first moment of genuine liberation, where the individual irrevocably breaks free from the gravitational pull of views. What exactly does the realization entail that allows the destruction of the entire basis?
It requires changing the fundamental internal operating system. It means shifting from the three core wrong views, that formula delusion we discussed, to the three core right views. The destruction happens when the object, the vatu, is finally seen as separate from the idea, the Diṭṭhi.
The wrong views, the formula of delusion, are those assertions of clinging.
Yes. Number 1, this is mine. Number 2, this I am. And number 3, this is myself.
And the moment of liberation, of achieving right view, is replacing that clinging with non-clinging. This is the profound psychological shift.
The right views are the mirror opposite, born from seeing reality as it truly is. Buddha Botato. 1, this is not mine. 2, this I am not. And 3, this is not myself.
I imagine this is not just about repeating the negative formula like a mantra. This has to be a deep experiential realization of non-self. How does the wise person achieve this?
They see the 5 aggregates, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, as they truly are, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. The insight that this is not me, this is not mine, is applied universally to everything.
And that realization destroys the 20 self-views, which are the fundamental mechanism of identity.
It pulls the rug out from under them. By seeing the impermanence of the object, the fixed idea attached to it collapses entirely.
And having seen this,
the individual proceeds toward disenchantment, dispassion, and cessation. This process naturally extinguishes the craving for becoming, the bhavadihi, and the craving for non-becoming, the vibhavaditti.
because there is no longer a fixed self to cling to or run away from.
Exactly. The entanglement just dissolves.
What are the practical, measurable outcomes for someone who has achieved this right view and become a stream enterer?
The sources confirm immense certainty and defined limits to future suffering. The 5 outcomes achieved here include certainty of liberation. They're guaranteed to never be reborn in the 4 lower realms, like the animal or hell realms.
And there's a maximum number of future lives, right?
Yes, a maximum of only 7 more rebirths, Satakatiparama, before complete enlightenment. They are also guaranteed to overcome doubt and, crucially, to destroy the fixed identity view and the clinging to rituals.
That is the complete and permanent destruction of the source of the thorn, the knot, and the wilderness that we discussed earlier.
Right view is the gateway to permanent freedom. Once you break the mechanism of attachment to the view, the mental rigidity and the self-inflicted pain begin to dissolve. The ultimate liberation stems entirely from changing that single internal formula of attachment. The entanglement of views is caused entirely by conflating the ephemeral object, which is constantly changing, with the fixed idea, the permanent interpretation that we attach to it.
So you are not trapped by the world. You are trapped by your fixed interpretations of the world.
That's the whole deep dive in a nutshell.
The most crucial shift, therefore, is letting go of that fundamental self-view. Recognizing that absolutely everything you experience, your most profound feeling, your sharpest opinion, your body, your career, your deepest identity, is subject to that triple attachment formula. This is mine. I am this. This is myself. Seeing that attachment for what it is, a delusion rooted in ignorance and unwise attention, is the first terrifying yet liberating step toward true freedom.
This raises an important final question for you, the learner, to consider as you finish this deep dive. Look at your most cherished, rigid, and argumentative belief, the one you spend the most mental energy defending. Trace it back to its root among the 8 bases. Is it fundamentally rooted in ignorance of impermanence, driven by unwise attention looking for permanence, or perhaps merely absorbed from external speech providing a prepackaged wrong view?
And then apply the insight we gained today. How would your life change if you treated that most rigid belief not as the core truth that must be defended at all costs, but as a thorn causing distress? A painful piece of mental shrapnel that needs to be carefully extracted by realizing, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. That realization is the quiet revolution.